The old Miller place stood at the end of Blackwood Lane, a skeletal structure of peeling paint and shattered windows that seemed to lean against the gathering twilight for support. For the children of the town, it was a dare, a place to prove one's mettle on a dare. For the adults, it was a bad memory they preferred to ignore, a scar on the landscape they hurried past with averted eyes. They called it the House of Dead, though no one could quite remember why the name had stuck. It was just one of those local truths, passed down through generations like a bad gene. For Liam, Elara, and Noah, it was the answer to a desperate need for cash. Recent college graduates with degrees that seemed less valuable by the day, they had pooled their meager resources to start a small, independent video production company. Their big idea was a series of documentary-style explorations of local legends, debunking or confirming myths with a blend of historical, research, and on-location investigation. The House of Dead was to be their pilot episode. "It's perfect," Liam said, his eyes alight with entrepreneurial zeal as he drove their beat-up van down the overgrown driveway. "The name alone is pure clickbait. We'll do the history, talk to a few old-timers in town, spend a night inside, and then reveal the logical explanation. Probably just squatters and bad plumbing." Elara, the researcher of the group, wasn't so sure. She'd spent the last week digging through microfiche at the local library. "The history is murky. The Millers were a reclusive family. Ezekiel Miller, the patriarch, was some kind of amateur inventor obsessed with spiritualism. The official record says the whole family, him, his wife, and 2 daughters, died in a fire in 1923, but the newspaper accounts are weirdly vague. They just say a tragic incident, and the house didn't burn down. It just stopped." Noah, the sound and tech guy, adjusted his headphones. "Stopped what?" "Just stopped," Elara repeated, her voice dropping. "Life stopped. No bodies were ever officially removed. The town just boarded it up and left it to rot." The van crunched to a halt before the looming structure. The air grew cold the moment they stepped out, a deep, penetrating chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. The house seemed to watch them, its empty windows like cataract-clouded eyes. The front door, a massive slab of oak banded with iron, was slightly ajar, as if inviting them in. "Okay," Liam said, hefting his camera onto his shoulder. "Rolling day 1. The exterior of the infamous House of Dead. As you can see, it's a classic example of late 19th century architecture, fallen into a state of severe disrepair." His voice, usually so confident, sounded thin and brittle against the oppressive silence of the place. They crossed the threshold, and the change was immediate. The air inside was thick and stale, heavy with the smell of dust, dry rot, and something else, something sweet and metallic like old meat. The silence was not an absence of sound, but a presence, a heavy blanket that seemed to swallow the noise of their footsteps and their breathing. Noah set up his audio equipment, frowning at the readouts. "That's weird. I'm getting a constant low-frequency hum, almost like a heartbeat. But it's everywhere. In the walls." The ground floor was a museum of decay. A grand piano in the parlor was a skeleton of broken strings and splintered wood. A formal dining room held a table set for a meal that was never eaten, the plates now furry with mold, the cutlery stained black with tarnish. In the kitchen, an old icebox stood open, revealing nothing but darkness and a lingering, frigid cold. It was in the main hallway that Elara found the first real piece of the puzzle. Tucked behind a collapsed bookcase was a small leather-bound journal. The cover was embossed with the initials EM. "Ezekiel Miller," she whispered, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The pages were brittle, the ink faded to a rusty brown. She began to read aloud, her voice a ghost in the dead air. "October 29th, 1922. The resonance engine is nearly complete. The veil is not a barrier, but a membrane. It can be tuned, made permeable. Sarah fears for the children, but she does not understand. This is not an end. It is a transcendence." Liam panned the camera over the journal. "Great stuff. A mad inventor. This is gold." "November 15th, Elara continued, her brow furrowed. "The first successful stabilization. A presence, cold and intelligent, now resides in the west bedroom. It calls itself the Watcher. It speaks of the other side. It is not heaven nor hell. It is simply the house." Noah looked up from his equipment, his face pale. "Guys, the hum—" It just changed. Got faster. A sudden deafening slam echoed from upstairs. All three of them jumped. The front door, which they had left open, was now firmly shut. "Wind," Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. "There is no wind," Noah replied, his knuckles white as he gripped his recorder. They decided to set up their base camp in the main parlor, a decision born from a shared, unspoken desire not to be separated. As dusk began to bleed into night, painting the world outside the grimy windows a deep indigo, the house began to wake up. It started with whispers, faint, sibilant sounds that seemed to come from the very walls. Just on the edge of hearing, Noah, obsessed, tried to capture them, holding his shotgun microphone up to the peeling wallpaper. "It's like multiple voices, overlapping. I can't make out the words." Then came the shadows. From the corner of his eye, Liam would see a tall, gaunt figure standing at the end of a hallway. But when he swung the camera, there was nothing there. Elara felt a cold, bony hand brush against her shoulder when no one was near. The temperature in the house plummeted, their breath pluming in the beams of their flashlights. Driven by a mix of terror and a desperate need for proof, they decided to explore the second floor. The staircase groaned under their weight, each step feeling like a betrayal. The upper hallway was a tunnel of darkness, doors lining either side like rotten teeth. The first room was a child's bedroom. A small rusted crib stood in one corner, a porcelain doll lying face down on the floor. As Liam's camera light swept over it, the doll's head slowly, mechanically turned to look at them, its painted eyes gleaming. "We should go back," Noah pleaded, his voice cracking. "No," Liam insisted, his filmmaker's instinct overriding his primal fear. "This is it. This is the story." They moved to the next room, the master bedroom. Here, the sense of violation was overwhelming. The large four-poster bed was shrouded in rotting velvet curtains. On the nightstand was a single framed photograph of the Miller family. Ezekiel, a severe man with intense eyes, stood beside a frail-looking woman, Sarah. In front of them were two little girls in identical white dresses, their faces solemn. But someone had scratched out the eyes of the entire family with a sharp object. Elara gasped, pointing at the photograph. "Look!" As they watched, a fresh, wet scratch slowly carved its way down Sarah Miller's face in the photo, as if an invisible nail was being dragged through the paper. That's when the screaming started. It was a high, piercing, childish shriek that came from the room at the end of the hall, the west bedroom, the one Ezekiel had written about. Terrified but compelled, they moved toward the sound. The door was colder than ice to the touch. Liam pushed it open. The room was empty save for a single, straight-back chair placed in the center, and hanging from the ceiling was a bizarre contraption of old radio parts, copper wire, and cracked glass tubes, all connected to a large Tesla coil-like apparatus. It was the Resonement Engine. It was inert, covered in decades of dust. But as they entered, one of the glass tubes flickered with a sickly greenish light. The childish scream came again, but this time it was a whisper right in Noah's ear. He cried out, stumbling back, his equipment bag spilling its contents. A small, glowing ball of light, no bigger than a marble, drifted out of the corner of the room and hovered before them. A voice, synthesized and distorted as if from an old radio, emanated from it. "You are in the house. You are part of the house now." Liam, his hands shaking, kept the camera rolling. "Who are you?" The light pulsed. "We are the Millers. We are the others who came. We are the house." Ezekiel tuned the frequency. He did not build a bridge. He built a receiver. The house is the receiver, and we are the signal, forever trapped between stations. The truth crashed down upon them. Ezekiel Miller hadn't been trying to contact the dead. He had been trying to tune into the frequency of the afterlife itself. He had succeeded, but in the most horrific way possible. He hadn't pulled spirits into our world. He had shifted the house itself into a liminal space, a permanent overlap between the living world and the dead. The House of Dead wasn't a house haunted by the dead. It was the dead. Its very walls, its floors, its air were composed of trapped consciousness, a psychic residue of everyone who had ever died within its boundaries, all fused together into a single tormented entity. The little ball of light, the consciousness of one of the Miller daughters, drifted toward Elara. "He is coming, the Watcher. He does not like it when new voices join the chorus." The door to the room slammed shut. The resonance engine began to hum, its parts moving of their own accord, dust shaking free as the tubes glowed brighter. The shadows in the room deepened, coalescing into a humanoid form in the corner. It was tall, impossibly thin, a man-shaped void that absorbed the light. It had no face, only a smooth, dark surface where a face should be. The Watcher. It took a step forward, and the temperature dropped so drastically that the moisture in their breath froze into tiny crystals. A profound sense of dread, of utter hopelessness, washed over them. "Run!" Elara screamed. They scrambled for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Noah, in a frenzy, picked up his heavy audio recorder and smashed it against the door's lock. It shattered, but the door held fast. The Watcher glided closer, an arm extending from its shadowy form, a limb that was not a limb, but a tendril of pure darkness. Liam, acting on instinct, swung his camera tripod like a club. It passed straight through the entity, but the thing recoiled as if struck, a static hiss filling the air. It wasn't hurt, but it was annoyed. The little ball of light that was the Miller daughter flew at the Watcher, flaring brightly. "Go!" the synthesized voice shrieked. Seizing the distraction, Noah gave the door one more desperate shove, and this time it flew open, splintering the frame. They tumbled out into the hallway and fled down the stairs, not looking back. The childish screams and the static hiss of the Watcher followed them, echoing through the cavernous house. They burst out of the front door, stumbling into the cold night air, gasping and sobbing. They didn't stop running until they reached the van. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking so violently he could barely get them in the ignition. The engine roared to life and he slammed the vehicle into reverse, speeding back down the driveway as if all the demons of hell were at their heels. They didn't speak until they were back on the main road, the lights of the town visible in the distance. They were safe. They had escaped the house of dead. It was only when they reached their cramped apartment, the familiar surroundings a jarring contrast to the nightmare they had just endured, that they began to process what had happened. They were alive. They had evidence. Liam's camera had recorded everything. "We have to destroy the footage," Elara said, her voice hollow. "We can't let this out. We can't let anyone else go there. Are you kidding?" Liam replied, a wild look in his eyes. He was already connecting the camera to his laptop. "This is the most documented paranormal event in history. This is everything we ever wanted." "Liam, no," Noah said, his usual calm replaced by raw terror. "That thing, the house, it doesn't want to be found. It wants to be fed. We can't be the ones to lead people to it." But Liam wasn't listening. The footage was uploading. The grainy, shaky images of the whispering walls, the moving doll, the scratching photograph, the shadowy Watcher. It was all there. It was pure, undeniable gold. The upload finished. Liam titled it House of Dead, The Lost Footage, and hit publish. He sat back, a triumphant, exhausted smile on his face. "It's done." For a moment, there was only silence. Then from the laptop speakers, a low, familiar hum began to emanate. The same hum Noah had recorded in the walls of the house. The three of them froze. The overhead light in the apartment flickered and died, plunging them into darkness, save for the glow of the laptop screen. On the screen, the footage of the house was playing, but it was different now. They could see themselves from a third-person perspective, running through the halls, their faces masks of terror. The hum grew louder, resolving into the synthesized, childish voice of the Miller daughter. "You are mistaken," the voice whispered from the speakers. "You did not escape the house. You brought a piece of the house with you. The signal just needed a new receiver." The smell of dust and dry rot and old meat began to fill the small apartment. The temperature started to plummet. On the laptop screen, the image of the Watcher began to slowly pixelate and reform, its smooth, dark face now filling the entire display. Liam stared in horror at his camera, which was sitting on the table. The little red recording light was on. It had been on the whole time. They hadn't escaped. They had simply relocated the horror. The house was not a place. It was a state of being, a parasitic memory, and they had become its newest permanent residence. The walls of their apartment seemed to grow indistinct, the boundaries of reality softening. The cheerful yellow paint began to peel and crack, revealing rotten plaster underneath. The comfortable sofa morphed into the splintered wood of the Miller's parlor furniture. Elara backed into a corner, her whimpers echoing in the suddenly vast space of their now impossible living room. Noah clutched at his ears, but the humming was inside his head now, a part of his own neural frequency, tuning him to the eternal broadcast of the dead. Liam finally understood. There was no pilot episode. There was no fame or fortune. There was only the house, and its insatiable hunger to have its story told over and over again, with new characters in an ever-expanding narrative of despair. He looked at the camera, its unblinking red eye a promise of perpetual torment. He was the director now, but the house was the producer, and the show would never, ever be canceled. The last thing he saw before the darkness swallowed him completely was the tall, gaunt shadow of the Watcher, detaching itself from the screen and stepping out into the room, its smooth, featureless face turning slowly to regard its new, forever home.